Reading from 2nd Chronicles, chapter 25, verses 1 to 10. Amaziah was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jehoadan of Jerusalem, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, yet not with a whole heart. And as soon as the royal power was firmly his, he killed his servants who had struck down the king his father, but he did not put their children to death, according to what is written in the law in the book of Moses. For the Lord commanded, fathers shall not die because of their children, nor children die because of their fathers, because each one shall die for his own sin. Then Amaziah assembled the men of Judah and set them by fathers' houses under the commanders of thousands and of hundreds for all Judah and Benjamin. He mustered those 20 years old and upward and found that there were 300,000 choice men, fit for war, able to handle spear and shield. He hired also 100,000 mighty men of valor from Israel for 100 talents of silver. But a man of God came to him and said, O king, do not let the army of Israel go with you, for the Lord is not with Israel, with all these Ephraimites. But go, act, be strong for the battle. Why should you suppose that God will cast you down before the enemy? For God has power to help or to cast down. And Amaziah said to the man of God, But what shall we do about the 100 talents that I have given to the army of Israel? The man of God answered, The Lord is able to give you much more than this. Then Amaziah discharged the army that had come to him from Ephraim to go home again. And they became very angry with Judah and returned home in fierce anger. But Amaziah took courage and led out his people and went to the valley of Salt and struck down 10,000 men of Seir. Success is a double-edged sword. It can inspire gratitude, humility, and a deeper dependence on God. Or it can lead to pride, self-reliance, and ultimately destruction. The story of Howard Hughes illustrates this. He was an American business magnate, aviator, and film director. At the height of his success, Hughes was one of the wealthiest and most influential men in the world. Yet, his empire crumbled as he descended into isolation, paranoia, and madness, driven by an insatiable desire for control and power. Indeed, arrogant success can become a prison, leading to a life of loneliness and despair. The life of King Amaziah of Judah offers a similar warning. Amaziah began his reign with wisdom and promise. When he came to the throne, he first secured his position and then avenged his father's murderers. Yet he obeyed the divine law by refusing to kill their children, since each one shall die for his own sin. This act of justice showed a heart that recognized God's standards. However, as he prepared to bring Edom back into subjection, his lack of spiritual commitment was exposed. Besides his army of 300,000 men, he hired 100,000 Israelite mercenaries for 100 talents of silver. On the surface, his military strategy was sound, but he failed to learn from the past. He did not realize that he had no right to ally himself with idolatrous Israel. Yet, God warned him against it through a prophet, assuring him that God would grant victory without the hired soldiers. Amaziah hesitated, worried about the financial loss. The cost restrained his obedience until the prophet reminded him, The Lord is able to give you much more than this. Indeed, disobedience is always much more costly than obedience. With this assurance, he sent the mercenaries back. In his battle against Edom, Amaziah defeated them, but there is no mention of any thanksgiving to God despite the overwhelming victory. Moreover, he cruelly killed 10,000 captured Edomite soldiers. Perhaps because of this unnecessary and barbaric act, his earlier compromise cost him dearly. The mercenaries, angry at being deprived of the chance to plunder, raided Judah's cities while the king was away at war, killing 3,000 people and looting the land. Amaziah's reliance on human alliances rather than on God's power and his bloodthirsty treatment of the captured enemies resulted in devastation. Flush with victory, Amaziah returned to his land. But strangely, he brought back the idols of Edom and worshipped them. The absurdity of this act is striking, as another prophet asked him, "Why have you sought the gods of a people who did not deliver their own people from your hand?" The logic was irrefutable. Yet Amaziah's pride blinded him. Instead of repenting, he silenced the prophet with a sneer and a threat, revealing a heart hardened by arrogance. Success was his real snare. Like Amaziah, we are often led astray by success. It often tempts us to become proud of our victory and gloat in our abilities, forgetting that every legitimate triumph is a gift from God. We can fall into the trap of self-reliance, mistaking our achievements for proof of our superiority, whether in our career, a personal endeavor, or a ministry. We may begin with humble dependence on God, but the temptation to trust in and glorify ourselves is ever present. Proverb says, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." Amaziah's story bears this out. After he rejected the prophet, God left him alone. Emboldened by his victory over Edom, he sought revenge against Israel for their earlier raids. Bloated with confidence in his military might, he challenged Jehoash, the king of Israel. In response, Jehoash delivered a parable. A thistle in Lebanon sent to a cedar in Lebanon, saying, "Give your daughter to my son for a wife." And a wild beast of Lebanon passed by and trampled down the thistle. Amaziah was a thistle, prickly but incapable of real injury. Conversely, Israel remained formidable even in its weakened state. Arrogantly refusing the warning, Amaziah went into battle and suffered a humiliating defeat. Jehoash captured him and brought him to Jerusalem, broke down part of its wall, plundered its silver and gold, including the temple treasures, and took hostages back to Samaria. His presumption not only brought personal disgrace, but also inflicted great loss and suffering on his people. They did not take it lying down. Eventually, 15 years later, his people assassinated him in Lachish, where he had fled from their hatred. A similar pattern of failure followed the Israelites after their victory over Jericho. They marched with a few men to capture the city of Ai without seeking God's guidance. Their overconfidence led to a devastating defeat. Success can breed complacent trust in our own power rather than humble dependence on God. Amaziah's downfall underscores the danger of pride and presumption because of success. The prophet Jeremiah reminds us, "Let not the wise man boast in his wisdom. Let not the mighty man boast in his might. Let not the rich man boast in his riches. But let him who boast in this, that he understands and knows me." Credit for victory belongs only to God. When we exalt ourselves above the one who grants victory, we betray our alienation from him and bring harm to those around us. Amaziah also reminds us of the need to humbly accept correction. When confronted by the prophet, Amaziah refused to repent. He went beyond that to rebel openly against the Lord who had sent the prophet to warn him. Pride deafened him to the divine reproof. A wise heart welcomes godly counsel and adjusts its course accordingly. Amasiah's story illustrates the consequences of half-hearted obedience. He began well, but was not committed to God. His loyalty was divided, and his self-reliance led to disaster. God desires our undivided allegiance, not mere lip service. Half-heartedness in our walk with God makes us vulnerable to idolatry and pride. Let us reflect on our own struggles with success, pride, and divided loyalty and examine our hearts. The dangers of success are real, but the wise will cultivate humility, seek God's will, and worship Him with the loyalty of an undivided heart. Amasiah's story could have ended in honor if he had acknowledged God in his victory and when he was reproved. Let us avoid these pitfalls by choosing humility over pride, obedience over presumption, and wholehearted devotion over divided allegiance. Let us live with the awareness that every victory and every success is a gift from God. Let us walk in humility, giving God the glory due to His name, and live in wholehearted obedience to Him. For in the end, our success is measured by our faithfulness to the One who gives us all good things. God bless.